Right, everyone, we'll make a start on our second presentation. So this is a topic I personally find very interesting. I saw Sarah posted this on LinkedIn a few months ago. We started having this discussion about automated testing, how do you make sure your report isn't broken. We're just talking now that something Microsoft doesn't really help you figure out. So I'm very, very curious to see how Sarah solved this problem. So over to you, Sarah, Power BI automation and testing.
Right, hi, so I'm Sarah. I'm going to do this talk about automated testing. It's automated checks, really, in Power BI. And I've called it Elevate User Confidence because what we're really trying to avoid is your users contacting you with errors. So a little bit about me. I'm Sarah Abnett. I'm from Birmingham. I've been to uni in Glasgow from Birmingham. I'm a SQL person, as you can tell. That's actually the finance SQL bit from last year. I love SQL. That's my main language. I've been working in data for decades. I'm ashamed to say I'm quite old. And I've worked in, probably like many of you, I've worked in many industries. I've worked in insurance, logistics, I've worked in healthcare, and I'm currently working for Cadbury's and Bonzabees. I have worked in lots of tech, very, very Microsoft heavy, I have to say. Started with SQL Server 2000, those decades ago. Probably over 10 years ago, started working with Azure Data Factory. And that was the first version of Data Factory. And I hope none of you had to experience that because it was bad times. But yeah, I love Data Factory now. Azure DevOps is one of my favourite tools, I think, largely because I'm motivated by those green ticks that you get from your pipelines in Azure DevOps. I'm also a big fan of Tabular Editor, which is great for looking at these semantic models. If anyone's not had a go with that. And Fabric I've used a little bit. And then the tool I'm here to talk about today is CAT. Yeah, you may not have heard of it, but hopefully you'll be interested to find out more today, after today. So this is the overview of the talk. I'm going to start with a specific problem. It's a similar problem to the one that Fabio just mentioned. We'll talk through the solution. I've got some pre-recorded demos because I'm not as good as Chandy. He's very fast on his little markup things there. And then we'll just touch on some other use cases for using the solution at the end.
In the merge?
Yeah, so yeah, well, I'm going to drop some on the side right of quick cut. So we've got a problem. The user phones up. They maybe contact you directly, or they maybe phone your support team and they say there's a problem with the report. Something is wrong, and what's wrong? So you tell them, can you just try and reset filters? That might fix it. It does often fix it in Power BI. Anyone had that experience? But no, that didn't fix it. So what is the problem? I've got this lovely report that's been created off the sample data that's available for Fabric. It's got this visual, which has got my trips by hours across the top and days down the side, and it's giving me the peaks and the troughs of those times of, it's obviously more journeys happening in the evenings. But now it looks like this. Hands up, has anyone experienced this problem? Because I've experienced it many times. It's always very sad feeling. Sad day. A weekly basis. Yeah, so I've definitely experienced that several times. You may not have experienced this, but bear with me because this solution will help this problem, but it should help other problems you're having with users discovering problems before you discover problems. So first, I'm just going to do a little recorded demo. This is me fixing the problem. So you may have done this when you've had this problem. You go into your report, you click edit. This is a Power BI service. You can see that there's an error on my measure here. It's saying average number of trips. I search for average number of trips in my semantic model. It's not there. But I do have average number of journeys, and I can tell that's basically the same measure. So I drag that into my report, reapply the conventional formatting, and that has fixed the problem, right? So this is part of our jobs. We're doing hot fixes in Power BI. That's kind of part of the role. That's fine, isn't it? Everything's good. It's got my conditional mask. I slightly picked different colours this time, but it's okay, isn't it? Right? We're good. This is our jobs. Well, no, because the user had to alert us to this problem. They probably saw the problem weeks ago. They were waiting for you to notice and fix it. They've taken this long and just finally got in touch. It's greyed out. Can you fix it? They're probably very frustrated, and they're not losing confidence in you, in your team, in your data platform, in your reports. This is not a good situation. So just briefly before I jump into the solution, just to explain why this might happen. So there's a sort of semantic model architecture maturity line. You may be, or you may have worked on this sort of like beginner end. I mean, beginner is the wrong term, but if your data sets are small, or if you're a citizen developer, you may be working in what we call a thick report, where your data is wrapped inside the same PBIX file as your report. So when you deploy those reports, you will have been looking at the data and looking at the visuals, and it's very unlikely you're going to get this grayed out report visual problem. But in my experience, the last couple of roles I've had, bearing in mind, I'm not a consultant, I just work in normal small places, but we were putting a lot of effort into the semantic models, which we were looking after with Tabular Editor. They were getting bigger, more complex. The developers looked after them, the sort of data engineering people. And then we had analysts, data scientists, and they were looking at reports and building we ended up with lots of reports off single semantic models. And so that's this one in the middle, the in reports architecture. And then currently where I am now, Mondelez is a mega global corporation. So we have these giant semantic models, huge, looked after by IT. And then downstream from there, we've got citizen developers putting together these composite models. So they connect to the giant semantic model, then they maybe add in some Excel or some SharePoint or whatever, and they get these composite models and they put their reports on top of those. So here we have more downstream reports, and they are being deployed separately to the semantic models which are being deployed by IT. And what happens sometimes, IT have to make a change, or they make a change, they don't really tell anyone. Or you just end up having to make a change thinking, well, probably no one will notice. But someone has noticed, and it's the user. So that's how you can end up with these problems. And all you need is a column to be named and your visuals grayed out. And it is like we were saying, it's a problem with Power BI. So ideally, if you've got like data sets refreshing, if there's an error, often it will error and you'll get an email to say your data set's failed to refresh. But you don't get any alerts or your visuals failing to show. So this is the solution I'm going to use. It's an automated testing tool. It's very lightweight and simple to use. They're called CAT, and the website is called justcat.it. I'm not sponsored by them, but they've sent some swag, so please come ahead and grab a pink pencil at the end if you would like. And the website's really full of useful documentation and little examples of how you can use it for your situation. So what can I do with CAT? So it just allows you to define very simply a bunch of data sources. So you can have data sources that are Excel files on your machine, PBIX files on your machine. They can be semantic models in the cloud. They can be data warehouses on SQL Server. There's no end to the number of data sources you can have. There's probably more SQL languages that I've listed here, but I've gone for the ones that I know, SQL and that. And this demo is going to be using that because I'm going to be querying a semantic model. And then what else it will let you do is, once you've got the results of your query from your query language, it will let you set an expectation. So the expectations are generally set is empty or set is not empty, or two queries, do they match, or this query should contain this, or this query should have this number of rows. So there's not that many expectations to go through, but they're very, the logic such that you can do almost any scenario with what is available. Just an aside that CAT has also launched a new UI, a user interface, which is in preview, which I have not looked at all. So if anyone has would like to look at it and then do a talk so that I can learn, that'd be great. So just to give a context for what we're working with. So like I said, I'm a SQL developer, but this project isn't using SQL really, it's mostly using these tools. So I will be working a lot in VS Code, but just to give you a sense of what we need to run this project, we will be writing code in PowerShell. We'll be using YAML, which is really just a markup language. It helps you put configuration together. It's very human readable and simple. And DAX, of course, which hopefully hands up everyone knows DAX because this is a Power BI meeting. The tools, what I will be testing will be Power BI and Fabric. And then later, in a few slides' time, I'll be using Azure DevOps to fully automate my testing solution. We're working with VS Code. I've stored the stuff I've written, I've put into GitHub, basically so you guys can access it if you want to. And then I'll be using that. So my pre-recorded demos, this is basically what we're going to do to get an automated test project up and running. First, we need a service principal. You may already have one. They're really useful for being able to connect to REST APIs and interact with Fabric and Power BI. But if you don't have one, they are really easy to set up. Obviously, you need permissions. You might need to ask someone with the right permissions to do it for you. You really just go into Microsoft Entra ID and create an app registration. It's as simple as that. Then you need to get the credentials of that service principal. And just if you don't know what service principal is, it's just a way of allowing you to authenticate without needing to be a specific person. So you can have the service principal credentials, but your team could also have those credentials on their machines. So you'd store the credentials in environment variables. And environment variables is a way of getting those credentials to store on somewhere like my machine, or I can put them on a server that's going to actually do the automation. And you can have different variables, so you might have different variables for production to test, for example. And so it's just a useful way of managing those pipeline deployment processes. And then I need to install some stuff. I need to install PowerShell 7. Most people will have PowerShell 3 or 4, but yeah, you need PowerShell 7 for CAT. You have to install CAT, so you just install it from their website. So I've already installed CAT before the demo starts. And then in the demo, you'll see me create a CAT project and configure it. I'll write a test and then I'll run them. So these are just, so before we get to the recorded demo, we're just telling you how to do the service principal. So you can send this slide to your IT department if you need to. So you go to Azure portal, go to Microsoft Entra ID, create an app registration. It really is as simple as that. You do need to enable a setting in Fabric, and so you need to have the tenant admin permissions to do that. You need to enable the setting here. Service principals can use Fabric APIs. And then you need to grant the service principal access to the workspace it to connect to. So the where your data model is. This is probably the most techy side, but it's just I wanted to provide. I'm not used to working from prompt to set environment variables, so I just put it in my demo so you've got it to refer to. You can use the setx command to the variable name, then the variable value. Just do that. It creates it on your laptop, and then that or your machine, and it persists. So you can turn your machine on and off, and the environment variable carries on persisting after. One thing just to note is that the application ID has to have this format of app : application ID, tenant ID, and then I've just given a little bit of code of how you do it in command prompt, and this is how you check your environment variables using commands. Right, so here's the first demo of my CAT project. So I'm going to create a folder, and it's called test model. I'm going to go into there and kick off PowerShell by typing pwsh into the address bar. And then in PowerShell, I'm writing import module cat. So it's already installed, it's just importing it into PowerShell. And then I've written new cat project, and I'm calling it test model, although I actually rename it later to call cat project. But yeah, so test model, and it creates a cat.yaml. So it's so tiny, sorry. So it creates a cat.yaml file, and it's given you some default values so you understand what you're supposed to do. And if I go to the Just Cat website, it gives you loads of snippets of all these different type of providers that you can use. And I've picked DAX.1, which is the one you need to connect to the Power BI semantic model. I've called it semantic model, which is really unimaginative, I have to say. Sorry, guys. And then I need the string so it can connect. And I'm going to the workspace settings and then license information. And that was the link there. I'm putting it in data source. So it's that API.PowerBI link. I need to make sure it's got the same name. So my semantic model name is called demo semantic model. And then here I'm putting my names of my service principal. So my service principal environment variable names. So the application ID and the secret. So that is going to pick up those values from the environment variables on my machine and use it to connect to the Power BI semantic model. I'm now writing a test. I'm giving it a name, just check that the metric exists. And you can give as useful description as possible, but I'm just saying I want to know that the metric's there, so my visualization is going to work. And this is just referring to that semantic model, the definition there. Sorry, should have gone for more imaginative names there, really. Can't do that. And then this DAX is really simple. It's just saying, give me passenger count, call it output. That's it. It's just give me the passenger count. And the expectation is that it's not empty. I then invoke my cat project. It takes a minute to connect the semantic model. And then it runs my test and it passes. And it's got a little cat. Is that what you're saying? Okay, so that's what I've done there, is just check that the cat project's working and that I can get it to work and I can run a test. So not very useful. A project that runs a single test isn't going to help anyone. You are going to want an automated testing project that's running tens, if not hundreds of tests to get any use out of this. So my idea for this demo and for this solution, for this problem, is that I want to generate a bank of tests and I want to use it, do it my PBIX file. So I've got my semantic model. It may have hundreds and hundreds, thousands of metrics, thousands of measures, thousands of columns. I don't want to check that they all exist. I want to check that the ones that my report is using exist, and that might be only using 10, 20, 50. So what I'm going to do is I've written some PowerShell that will loop through the data in the file and pull out the measures and the columns that the PBIX file is using. Okay, but I need first, in order to do that, I need to save it in a PBIP. Is anyone using PBIPs? Good. So if you're developing PBIPs already, this is fine. But if you're not, you just save it as a PBIP, and then you can use this PowerShell to get the measures out. So first things first, save it as a PBIP. Then run the PowerShell that I've put in GitHub, which you can use. And I have to say, it's not production ready. It's just a sample of code, but please feel free to use it. And then it's going to generate a bunch of cat tests, and I'm going to put them in my project and run them. So for this demo, for this one, for some reason I made a little explanation of where we are, and then I made it new. And I don't know why I did that. So here's my file. I'm going to save it as a PBIP. This, and that creates a report.json file, which is really just all the information about the report that put in JSON, so that you can actually read it with PowerShell and iterate through the JSON and get some useful information out of it. And that PBIP is in GitHub as well, if you want to that. So I've got my extract metrics.ps1, my PowerShell script. So it's going to connect to my report.json file. This is the iteration, so it's doing lots of for eaches, and then outputting all of the metrics and then building it into a little bit of YAML that works with cat. So I go into where my PowerShell script is, pick off my PowerShell command prompt, and just say /extract metrics.ps1, and it just gives me the output is .csv, which is all the measures, so you can check it, and it gives you all the YAML. And it's doing like first non-blank value for columns, and it's doing that evaluate measure measures. I then just copy all of those, that bank test, and paste it over my single test that I just ran in the first demo. And then save that, and then go and run the cat project again.
You have to be an admin to do this. PowerShell. Like run as admin. You don't seem to have done it there.
So.
Right.
Good. No, maybe. I think you
You're
need
not doing
to.
anything. It's
Just reading stuff.
when I calling just calling
Mm.
so
Yeah.
The admin stuff will be the connecting, which is what the service principle is.
Right.
but then the actual query and case sets that's going to be simple.
Yes.
And so after it's run, it's passed something like 14 tests. It's not a huge bank of tests yet, but one has failed. And it's showing you that it's the average number of trips failure, which is the same thing that the user reported earlier. And I just want to show you again, my test file is matching the success rate of my Power BI file, as in I've got one error on the Power BI file, one error on my cat project. The idea is that, the idea is that you could be doing this on a daily basis. So to this point of the demo, cat is free. So if you want to just run this, you can have hundreds of tests in your cat project, the cat.yaml file, run it for free. You get coming in, doing that on a daily basis. You could all be doing that as long as you've got the right admin permissions and stuff, and you can install everything. From this point onwards, you might need to pay some money because to use cat as in an automation pipeline, you need to just pay them a bit of money for the tool. So what we've done is we've done a single test to check cat, then we've done a bank of tests, and now what we're going to do is just plug it into a pipeline so we can get it to run on an automatic basis, which really I think is the ideal point, because you could be running this daily, hourly, every 10 minutes if you have money to throw at DevOps. And importantly, if you've got things that fail intermittently, which I've definitely seen, like when your data is a bit dodgy and your logic is a bit dodgy, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, you need to know when it's failing, like if it's failing at the weekend, if it's failing on bank in the day. So I think running it regularly is really the ideal situation. But, that's where to then ask someone to focus and stuff. So what I'm going to use to automate it is Azure DevOps, and that's partly because I know it, I like it as a tool. It's when I did this as a proof of concept on my last role last year, and I used Azure DevOps. I just really liked the Azure DevOps tests feature, which I think we don't see enough in the data platform. It's something that's used all the time by full stack developers. So what we're going to do is Azure DevOps. Does anyone not know what Azure DevOps is? Oh. It's really a tool. It's a platform for source control, So you can keep your code in it, you can deploy your code from Azure DevOps. You can also do things like work items and Kanban boards in Azure DevOps. It's a really useful tool, but all we're doing with it today is using it as a way of automating the running of these checks. It's not actually going to deploy anything, it's just going to run the checks. So what I'm going to do with Azure DevOps is very similar to what I've done already. I'm going to keep my service principal credentials in there by creating a library and putting them in variables. I also need to add the license keep account. As I said, you have to pay for it at this point. I have to create this run tests YAML. So I know I've already talked about YAML. This is a slightly different YAML file. The cat.yaml file will be a bunch of tests that you'll have to maintain and keep adding tests to. Run test.yaml is really just the thing that's going to kick off the process. So once you've got that right, you don't have to touch it very often. And it's going to do exactly what I've just done manually. So it's going to install cat, invoke cat, and publish the test. And then to create the pipeline, you just sync Azure DevOps with GitHub and say, use my run tests YAML file. So it's pretty simple. That's what the recorded demos do. So I'm in Azure DevOps. I've gone into my cat demo project. Here's the variables, the secrets I've added, cat license key and my service principal, application ID and secret. I'm going to create a pipeline using GitHub as my source, which means that I have to then log into GitHub and get them to sort of pair up. I can then pick my automated testing repository and say existing Azure pipeline YAML file. I pick my run tests YAML, which again is available to you all in GitHub. So that's it there, but I'm going to go into VS Code to actually look at it a bit more closely. So it is telling you which variables to use, is telling you what sort of machine to use, because you actually get an Azure DevOps machine to actually run these tests. You don't have to run it on your own machine. And you get a sort of like a bunch of 3 minutes generally to run these tests. It's going to do exactly what I've already done. So it's going to be installing cat, invoking cat, running the project. And these are the environment variables being defined. And then it publishes the test results. And then you run the pipeline, and you do actually have to click into it and make sure you said commit. So the first time you run it, the pipeline has to have permission to look at the variables in the library. But then it just runs and you get the green ticks, which what is better? What could be better than seeing green ticks? So yeah, so this is stuff that we've just been doing already in PowerShell on my machine, but now it's doing it on a Azure DevOps agent in the cloud. So it's installing, you have to install MSOLAP as well, which is the driver that allows cat to connect to your semantic model. Install cat, execute the tests, and publish the test results. That one's not green, I know. It's actually successful. It publishes the test successfully, but because one of them has failed, it goes orange. Sorry, just go back. So this is Azure DevOps tests. So I've only run the 14 tests, 13 have passed. We've got 1 failure, and then you can sort of click into that and look at which one has failed. So that's what I'm doing here. So clicking on the test and saying, oh yeah, it's that Azure, is that flipping trips metric disappearing again? And so you can actually sort of like see what your failures are and go and work out how to debug them. You can also, so that is the end of that demo, but just to sort of say, I've not really, made it clear that this is something that you then could trigger to run every 10 minutes, every hour, every day. And you can get it to send, you haven't done this, but you can get it to send you alerts if there are errors. Yeah, so I think that's sort of that is the sort of solution to my problem, I think. So we'll just go over this will only take 5 minutes if you've got any. But some other use cases for automated testing or automated checks are migration projects. So migration projects are kind of the bread and butter of data. I've been doing migration projects since my first job, when it was like getting off business objects onto priority or something like that. And now it's getting off Azure or on-prem into Fabric. It's always migration. And it's a perfect use case for this sort of automated testing, because ideally your new platform should match the old platform, right? You should be having the same numbers coming through. So you just define 2 data sources in your cat.yaml file, and then it can either be the same query or similar query that should return the same results. So say, my invoices for yesterday should equal this, and the sets should match, and run that every day, so that that they're always matching, not just on the day you've released them, not just on the day you've developed them. I think that's a great use case for the solution. Test-driven development is something I think would be good to see more in the data world. It's something that is done often in application development, where you write a bunch of tests to say what you are going to build. So I did it briefly, where I was like writing tests to capture. So a bug got reported, I'd write a test, my test would fail, and it would keep failing until I fix the bug. And then once it's fixed, it passes, and then that test is just there as part of my bank of tests that are checking my platform is correct, going forwards in time. I've got like a half minute demo of that. And then just any issues being reported. If you've got users coming to you with issues, add them into the bank of tests. Just keep building that bank of tests so that you always confirming that the quality of your data platform is good. So this is just a page to show how you would do a migration test. So I've added to the same cat.yaml file another provider for SQL Server, and it's actually connecting to the data warehouse in Fabric. So it's a very similar set of configurations. And then my query, this is how you do it. So you do first data source semantic model with the same query. And then the second data source is this new source. And it's using a bit of SQL to say, give me a count of the rows in trip. And it's saying they should match. And I sort of fudged it so it would return an error. So in the Azure DevOps test, you get this sort of like little ANSI diagram of what the difference is. So you can actually see the information just there as you're looking at the failures. And then final little recorded demo to show you. This is me doing TDD. So I've written a check for that the trips error. I can see it has been failing until recently. And if I go into the one that was failing and go into the history tab, it gives you a little column chart that's over time. So it's got my failures, fail, and then I have to scroll right to see the pass. And then ideally it will just keep passing going forwards. That's it. I just wanted to mention John Kursky's done a similar thing, but it's kind of more of a it's part of his CI/CD process, and he talked at Power BI from last year, and that's really interesting. And it does some similar stuff, but I would say it's and it uses DAX query review, but it seems to be more about making sure you're checking everything as you deploy it, which is worth doing that as well as part of your CI/CD process. But I think those, because in data platform, our code and our data are separate. The data's out there, and our code is like, so you might end up having new errors each day. It's just a different thing to application development. Right, so that's the end. Here's some references. So please, if you've got questions or issues, or if you want to try it out and get stuck, contact me on LinkedIn and ask questions. You can get to my code and get to her and start the justcat.my2 website. So any questions? Good phone, actually. Yeah, any questions?
I've got a question. So at the very
It's like-
at the very start, you had the link, but I forgot what it was. Was that the XMLA link on the workspace you got, or was it just the workspace link? Because if it's XMLA, it means in premium to do what you did at the start.
yeah,
doesn't
you
want
do.
the first
I think you do need premium to
Right.
actually use semantic models.
Right. So could you do this locally, so without relying on it?
Yes, You
Right.
can connect, so you could have a PBRX file on your machine with the data in it, and you can connect to that and do the checks.
Right. Yeah.
So bear in mind, the demo I've gone through is for the specific problem I'm having,
Yeah.
which requires premium, really, I would say, because it's that kind of more the sort of like
Yeah.
advanced level semantic model stuff. But if you're having problems, constant problems, or users finding problems, there probably is a solution that could be worked out, because there's loads of different providers. Yeah, Excel, like you can
Yeah.
connect to Excel and check your Excel. Did you? Yeah.
So another example is funny see in some ways that's very out now because it's a scheme check really. So if you were trying to why position what I see for this is more of a CI process where you say I expect the scheme to want to check before you deploy a function. Because this requires you to deploy, do a refresh, and check to see if you get results back.
But are you so yes, you could probably manage this with CI/CD if your reports are always being deployed alongside your semantic models, or they're being managed by the same team. Is that what you're saying?
So
So,
what I'm saying is, if you were to run, if you were to run one of the C# programs, so you could get a list of all the measures. If you had a list, a YAML list of all the measures you expect to occur, you do a dip to make sure that the test would be doing the measures exist. They don't necessarily return results. They don't return results. Editor, just metadata checking.
sorry, I'm not following you. Sorry, but yeah. So, but I'm getting the. So bearing in mind when you've done your report, so that lovely beautiful report I created, I get my bank of tests from there. At the point I've created the report, they're all going to pass because I've just literally just built that report. They're all passing. I'm then going to add that to my bank of tests, so it runs it every day of the year for the next year. So if anyone goes in and changes those metrics in the semantic model, I'll get the error.
But then the question is, how are you making those changes? So if this semantic model changes,
I'm assuming
if you have a CI/CD process, then the only deployment is going to be if you do have doing publishing, then yeah.
No, I've worked in like you can deploy a semantic model using a CI/CD process that breaks the report.
Absolutely.
So I'm talking about that situation, and I'm in this scenario, I'm sort of pretending I'm just a report developer and I have no ownership of this semantic model.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Oh, one thing I was going to say actually, if people don't have questions, if anyone wants to shout out what they might use, so maybe you've all got great automated testing things working, we just don't talk about it. If anyone's got a solution already for this.
There is another John Kursky thing using playwright, where it runs embed some checks for some visuals.
That would be good.
So then you don't have to define the test; it just knows it's
using Playwright.
Playwright. So that's a Microsoft product. Just for that. JavaScript to check. See.
Did we talk about that?
That's not what they presented last time. He presented something a little bit differently. I've seen that blog post as well.
Where is it?
It's on YouTube.
Is it easy?
It's relatively easy.
Anyone else got a solution for the just check? Because this, bearing in mind, so that might fix that might be another solution to fix the grayed out visuals. But I've had other things like users phoning up and saying, where's the holiday data one again? Like for the third third time running, and it should be something that's being caught by your ETL processes. Like you should be finding out that the data's dropped out, but things aren't always perfect. Like this would be a bucket to put all of those errors that are being reported, because just I don't want to be told for the third time that data's gone. I'm concerned I just kind of get quite angry.
Did you have a good strategy for doing TTD? Because every time I've ever thought, the main problem is data that's already changing, so it's very hard to write a test that's going to be found in the future.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a solution that I haven't seen like running for years. So it would be interesting to see if you got a huge bank of tests, would then that become like this overwhelming thing to maintain if they kept on failing for the data changing.
The only way that it seems to be feasible would be if you could inject data into a pipeline to test. Because if you're doing software development testing Python script, test set data which will be next time.
Yeah, right. Which is done that. That injected data thing is something that's I've seen before. Yeah, I did it. Yeah. I'm not saying this is the be all and end all. I'm just saying we should talk about data testing more, and this is one of my options. I'd love to see more people talking about it.
I think you made a point earlier that your data is often managed and stored by these big IT departments in, thousands of miles away. There's not a connect with people who are on the front end making the reports and stuff. I think it's a really good point. And yes, we all have seen these great because IT has made a change to something.
Yeah. So it's sorry wrong.
Yeah.
Actually, just that thing, is that specific to semantic and Power BI?
No, that's what I'm just looking at almost any data source using.
Any?
Like Excel, you could be checking
Yes.
Excel files.
How much is it?
So it's something like $300 a month for the automation.
Is it per user or is it
No, that's
just anyone kind of?
yeah. Well, there's an enterprise. That's the basic level, and then there's an enterprise level, which is like then you can run thousands of tests, but your basic one you can run about 600 tests automated. I think that's workable, right?
Do they have Docker images?
I don't know.
Take a final question. Anyone else?
Okay. Yeah, if it was me, I'd create a data quality page. So when the error appears, it could be like in a summary view, and then you could also compare it to previous export to understand the difference. And when I'm using ETL, I actually do reverse ETL. So where there's an error, I'll put it in a separate camp. So I know it's everything that will affect, for instance, a one-to-many relationship. So that's the way I would reflect the logic, is I'd actually create a separate page and nest my automated check within it. Then at a glance in the refresh on Power BI, I'll reevaluate it, assuming I had data quality errors in the first place. But if IT wanted to make a change to the field, I would rather take the original field as it is and send an email out rather than rename, because you take everything down at the same time. Sometimes it's a good process.
In the situation we've got at Mondelez, it's all metadata driven. Sometimes it just because it's changed at source, and there's no way of keeping the so sometimes they just have to change.
But that's right. But if they're going to do it, they should last. Like
data quality visibility, so that users can fix data. That's like a whole other subject. I would say that's not really what this is about, but it's a good idea to have it as a separate page.
Even yourself to have a look at versus the previous version.
Yeah.
That's a question.
Quick last one. Are you do you set up a repo just for tests?
Or
Or do you have anything else in there?
bear in mind this is a demo, so I've not really done that. the previous test.
So in production, you just have
That would probably be a
you
good idea.
just cat only.
Probably a good idea to do that, yeah. Because then you could, because
This is
What-
not part of CICD. It's just a data.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, you can if you got cats and you did this, and it's not CICD. But you could also use it as part of your CICD if you wanted to. So, but the demo I've done today is not CICD. But you know, you could do anything with cat. It's just an easy way of allowing people to write tests. Like, if you had a huge, say it again,
Expectations.
it is a bit like the expectations. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much, Sarah. You did it again. Let's give Sarah a proper round of applause.